Welcome to the World of Horror podcast with Mom and Mac. I'm Mom.
And I'm Mac.
This is the podcast where we share our love of international horror. Everyone has their fears, but we are not afraid of subtitles. WoHos! This week, our friend Martin Harries from the Film vs. Film podcast has brought us a film that means the world of horror to him. Before we get into it, fair warning, these discussions will include spoilers and language which may not be suitable for all listeners. Welcome, Martin.
Hello. Yes, it's lovely to be here yet again. Pleasure to be here.
We are happy to have you. And this week you have brought us a film that was a first-time watch for Mac and me. And what is the film that you have brought, Martin?
So I watched this film when I was 18, 19 at university studying film, and there was a horror class that they were doing, and they were kind of going through 60s horror, I think, and they were talking about Hammer horror, British horror, I think it was all about, and there's a lot of about Hammer stuff, but there was also film from Amicus Studios in Shepperton. And they were kind of a rivals with Hammer kind of thing. Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee were kind of doing films in both studios. Hammer was more Frankenstein, your more gothic films. A lot of Dracula, obviously. But they also did films in the Amicus Studios as well. And they didn't just do anthologies, which this one is, but they did more straightforward horror as well, but they were kind of more famous for their portmanteaus as they were known then, and now we kind of call them anthologies, so lots of different stories all kind of connected by one story at the start, and I thought it'd be cool to focus on the first one they did from 1965, Dr. Terror's Train of Horrors. It should really be called.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors.
Or Deck of Horrors.
Yeah. Peter Cushing calls it House of Horrors. He refers to the house as his house, his deck of horrors, yeah. Tarot cards. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was pretty obsessed with these films at university. I was like, I need to watch all of them and see what all the stories are. I just thought it was just a really cool concept to have a lot of different horror stories all in the same film.
Yeah. But yeah, I love anthology horror. I feel like horror stories in general, I always say on the pod that 90 minutes for a movie to me is just the best for a horror movie. But I even like anthologies more maybe because so many horror stories just need to be bite-sized, Yeah. And I like short, anthology novels too with horror. I just feel like it's if you draw something out too much, it just loses a lot. But I thought these were all really fun. And I could definitely see where I think current anthologies draw inspiration from movies like this. Because, even though VHS might be very different of a plot, I don't know, it's still very much just watching all these people meet their doom,
Yeah, there's something satisfying about that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
And also it's just that cool feeling of just oh, this is not the only story in this film. There's always going to be a new one to look forward to in the same movie. So
yeah. And you get to see so many great so many actors get to shine. I felt the best part, I already came in loving Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, and Donald Sutherland, but I thought all of them did a great job. They all get to, be the main character for a little bit.
Yeah. They all get their moment to shine in each story.
Yeah.
Yeah, Martin, I wanted to ask you about Roy Castle and Michael Luff. Were these names that were recognized at the time? I think they were just higher up in the cast list. So I was just wondering about them.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I wasn't around in the 60s.
No, I know.
but,
I know. I realize that.
Yeah, I didn't recognize, those guys. So I wasn't sure if they were big people just that never made a splash in the US or if they're kind of like not that famous.
Yeah, I don't think they're that famous, to be honest. I think Roy Castle possibly was in the Carry On movies. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's mainly like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing that are the big guns, really, at that time. I think certainly like Donald Sutherland was still not a particularly well-known actor at the time.
Yeah, he looked like a baby.
When I looked up, he looked so young. When I looked up Roy Castle on IMDb, like the poster for this movie was like one of the only 2 pictures in his IMDb. Also, interestingly, it seems like he had a music career, which ties in with his character.
He does.
Yeah, I heard that he could play the trumpet, but he was actually not playing the trumpet in the film.
Because I was paying attention, it looked like he was playing that trumpet.
Yeah.
Like it didn't look like he was pressing random valves or anything.
Yeah, certainly the one convincing part of that story for sure.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, that one was a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, should we go through them a little bit and just talk a little bit about each one and what stuck out?
Yeah, I kind of like that first one of the opening shots before you go into the story. There's this really great like panning slow shot from Peter Cushing's perspective as Dr. Terror, and that everyone gets like a chance to give him like a weird look, apart from Christopher Lee, who's not interested. Like, I'm not gonna give this guy a weird look before we go into the stories, which I found was quite funny.
Honestly, I found that beginning train part very captivating. Like, I enjoyed watching them all settle in and how polite they all were. I was like, these guys are just so nice. Every new guy, obviously except for Christopher Lee, who's like a sourpuss from the get, but I love that also. Like, he's such an asshole. Like, the guy accidentally closes the door on him and he shoots him 2 glares.
Yeah, so I also thought that the cinematography was really great in this film. There's some deep focus, there's some other stuff going on, and I know that the director was the same director as The Innocents, which we covered on this. Quinn and I covered that film a long time ago. But anyway, Freddie Francis, and good stuff. So we have our main characters who are all traveling together on this train. And Martin or Mac, how would you describe Dr. Terror himself?
So I guess he's a creepy Sherlock Holmes who has tarot cards. So I think he's like asleep, isn't he? And then his bag like drops on the floor, and one of them picks it up, and someone notices the cards, and they all get curious about that, and it goes from there. It's like, tap the cards 3 times. He goes through a lot of different accents, I must say.
Right? I was trying to pinpoint. I was like, where is this guy supposed to be from?
Yeah, like
I did like
Russian
in his
there,
little
German. I don't know.
When like he first
Caribbean.
comes up to the door, there's like this smoke machine that kind of goes off in front of him.
Yeah.
Like so mysterious. And then Roy Castle's like, these some weird cards. How do you play poker with these?
No, they're actually tarot cards.
Yeah, I love that Christopher Lee, even though he hates all of this, he knows exactly what they are.
Yes. Yeah. The setup for each story is he has the person tap the cards 3 times, and then he pulls these 4 cards, and then we go into the story, and they're all pretty grim stories. But
and then the 5th card that he'll show afterward is what you can do to avoid your fate, if you can.
Yeah. I know. Spoilers. It's not good.
Also, but it's so wild because all of these, I know we'll get to how the movie ends, but if you told me giving these predictions, I'm like, well, there's pretty easy ways to not meet these fates.
Right.
You can make some choices. Like if I was any of these guys, I'd be like, okay, I won't do that thing then. You know?
Yeah. Yes. At least 2 of them are just like, yeah, leave the house.
Yeah.
Go home.
And I'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right, so the first story, I don't know, do they all have titles? I'm not sure what the titles were, but
They do. Or I just saw on the IMDb, like the first one's like the werewolf, I believe.
oh, okay. Yeah. Not too mysterious there. So, so this one involves a guy going back to the house of one of his ancestors or something like that, one of his old relatives. And
Cosmo,
yeah.
Yeah, I think this one had like a genuine scare for me. Like a lot of the other stories aren't particularly scary, certainly watching them now, but like that final shot of like the werewolf woman with a quick wig change and a nail file to her nails was pretty good actually. I quite like that. Yeah. I think it worked pretty well as well with the reveal because there wasn't really any music there. It just kind of happened. With a lot of the other stories, there's like a lot of dramatic music, so I kind of like that. But some of the like werewolf lore here was a little confusing at the end. It all kind of came together like very quickly. I was like, what just happened?
I feel like this one in general, I liked it, but it was kind of the most confusing. Like, the setup and like why she's like attacking him, and even I feel like I think his name's Jim. Like, I feel like knowing that, or I was looking at the IMDb while watching, so and the IMDb just lists it as like segment werewolf, so I knew like, okay, well, there's a werewolf in here. But even knowing that, it's like out of nowhere, he's kind of like, well, I got these silver bullets, so this must be a werewolf. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
How do you know?
I think it's great as well, because if you don't look at the IMDb, you don't necessarily know like what this story is all about. Whereas a few of them, you know, from literally minute one, what the threat is here. Whereas with this one, there is some genuine mystery here. And there's some great shots as well of just like, when they go down to the basement, it definitely has a real strong gothic feel compared to the other ones. That's the thing with Amicus films as well. They try to be like more modern than Hammer. The less gothic, the better, really, with them. But sometimes it's just kind of hard to get away from the gothic stuff because it is so good. And certainly this first one is a good story for me. I really liked it. There's a great kind of shot where the coffin opens by itself and the creepy hand, comes out. That was cool.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this movie has a big emphasis on hands.
Yeah, definitely does.
Like there's not only like the hands in this, but also like when you mentioned the werewolf woman, like her hands, it was a big shot of like her with her sharp fingernails and whatnot. Like I feel like hands are the focal point of a lot of, but I like that. I feel like I like hands. I like drawing them. So I feel like it's cool to, I don't know, have them be kind of creepy items.
Isn't it notoriously hard to draw hands though?
It is. That's why I feel like a sense of like, I don't know, like I've conquered this. Ha!
Right.
I drew this hand.
Cool. Yeah, I think this one is really impressive though, because you can definitely tell that there are some areas towards the end where they're like really trying to hide what they can't really show, because obviously they're using a real wolf at the end and there's no real transformation sequence. That would be like the entirety of their budget if they focused on that in this story. You wouldn't have any other stories probably. So even with like where they're cutting around a lot of it towards the end, it still works pretty well, I think.
Yeah. Martin, I'm going to ask a really ignorant question, but were Amicus films made with a smaller budget than Hammer films?
Yeah, I think so. I think Hammer was certainly the bigger studio. They were more successful, I would say.
Yeah, I was just looking at, actually, Donald Sutherland was paid £1,000, which translates to like £21,000. So that's still not very much. I mean, hey, I wouldn't.
No.
nothing to
My
sneeze
favorite early actor.
nothing to sneeze at,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think, the budget was pretty small for this film. So I was just curious. I've
Yeah.
seen a couple Hammer films, and this was, I think, my first Amicus film. Should we talk about Creeping Vine, the second tale?
Yes, we should.
I mean,
So
I think
Mac has a background in plants. So how did you?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
okay, I studied horticulture in college, and this came out in 1965. So, granted, probably a lot changed, but there were just some like straight up inaccuracies like that just really like threw me a little bit. But
Or
again,
the inaccuracies where when he's looking through the microscope and he can see brain matter.
Oh yeah, that was
well, that one was
incredible.
wild, but there was like a moment where he's talking about plant life, and then he just lists a whole bunch of things that are not plants, like not even at all within the text, like fungi, not plants. Like, he said something else. I can't remember, but bacteria, not a plant. Like, that's definitely not a plant. And then when they were talking, I mean, even now people are inaccurate when they talk about like man eating plants, but it's like granted, I don't think this is like super common knowledge, but like Venus flytraps and stuff don't eat, like, but it's not that they're eating meat, they're taking in the carbon dioxide, and that's just a different way to do it. But like, there's no plant that eats meat. Like, that's not a thing. So that threw me a little bit. But again, I was like, it was almost more entertaining that it was so inaccurate.
Yeah, these vines just want to kill people and move on. Just leave them there.
There's also like the least sinister looking vines ever.
Yeah.
Like, the most sinister thing is that they will choke out the hydrangeas, I think.
I felt so bad for Anne, though, because she found 2 victims of the vine.
I know.
I
this
mean,
poor woman.
how traumatized is she going to be? But
why are you leaving the windows open? Like, this guy. Oh, one thing I thought was I thought was a common thread, which I first noticed in this one, was the amount of like specialists and whatnot that are like, I'm going to live in the person's house to investigate this. Like, this is not a thing. That this guy's like, I'm going to live in your house also so I can study the vines. Like, what? No, get out.
I'm an expert in these things. I need to live with you, please.
Please make me some food.
It has like one of the best lines though, where I think Bernard Lee, who plays M in the early Bond movies, where he says, "A dog strangled by a vine. I can hardly believe it."
Well, I really could hardly believe it either. I mean, now it's like cliche for, you see an animal, you're not going to see the animal for long. But I was really surprised that they killed that dog, Rusty.
Yeah, poor Rusty. That little girl was such a great actress. Like, she's sitting all morose, and the mom's like, "What's the matter?" She takes off her glasses, like, it's just not the same without Rusty. Like, she performed that line so well. She was the saddest little girl. And also, this one has the biggest implications for the rest of our world, because there's no, like, because they're like, oh, everything, humanity will be in danger if there's an organism that can survive fire or something like that. And then the vines learn how to stamp out the fire. Yeah. And then it's just kind of left like, okay, so these vines still exist, I guess, in this world. Yeah. And even Peter Cushing says like, well, I hope it's not true for our sake too. So that means, like, no matter what, humanity's gonna go down like a Little Shop of Horrors route because of this story.
I kind of find it funny as well, where like Bernard Lee, like, he escapes with the newspaper on fire and then he just leaves them. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. What about the people in the house?
Right?
He's more concerned about the rest of the world than the people in the house. But
I was really impressed by the actor who got strangled and was just laying on the bed. I'm always just like, wow, how did they stay so still? But he was amazing. So after this story, Dr. Horror reveals that, well, I don't know if he reveals it, the death card.
He doesn't show it yet. Like
We
he does it both with the werewolf and this one, yeah, where he draws it. He's like, oh, never
Let me
mind.
put that back in the deck.
You don't need to see that yet.
He thinks he's so slick. Like he shows the camera and is like, ooh, wink. Put it back.
So the third one is called Voodoo.
This one's probably the most offensive
Yeah.
to modern standards.
Yeah, it's a little bit racist. Yeah.
But at least it is drawing attention to the fact that that this guy can't hold himself back for 2 seconds before he's like, let me steal something from another culture and make money off of it. He can't help himself.
Yeah, this one is kind of one of the funniest ones, I think. I mean, Wind isn't particularly scary. I mean, there's a lot of like wigs and hair, bad hairdos flying around in that casino scene, concert scene, or whatever. Yeah, I did quite like the voodoo dance ceremony. That was kind of impressive.
Yeah.
But again, it was just funny when Roy Castle was like hiding in the bushes, and every time the film cuts back to him, one of the voodoo people hides behind him, and it ends up there being like 4 people behind Roy Castle, and he doesn't really notice anything. I'm like, dude, there are 4 people, and one of them's literally at a right angle to him.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that scene
you
was
not
amazing.
see this, dude?
I kept wondering, like, how often, like, okay, there's 1. Oh, there's 2 now. Okay, how many? And I think there might actually be 5 by the end of just surrounding him.
Yeah.
Definitely at least 4.
Yeah.
And also I was like, this man is a great musician to be able to listen and then write down the notes, like, on the paper. I was like, well, he's pretty talented.
Yeah.
I do love characters though that get warned of something like multiple times and they're like, nah, I'm good. I do like that as a device of like, you do deserve it. Like you were warned.
Yes. That guy fainted real good at the end.
Yeah, he like got the vapors. Just like swooned.
Yeah. And
I don't remember the name of the god, but
yeah, he just takes
Damballa.
the music paper and leaves.
Damballa is the god from Chucky.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
I also feel like this guy got off pretty easy. Like he just took his stolen music, but he didn't like chop him to bits or anything. Like I guess we can assume he's dead, but like that's a pretty easy way to die. Just swoon in the arms of a man, like, and then fall on the ground.
I guess
there is actually a story in one of the other Amicus films with Joan Collins where her husband like murders her and he chops her up into pieces and like mails all the pieces away.
Oh my God.
all of Joan Collins's body parts come back to haunt the dude, which is kind of funny. Just reminded me of that.
Yeah, why would you mail them?
I like that too. I like that idea when the object just keeps like reappearing and reappearing.
I think that's scary.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. You can't burn it. You can't. Well, we'll get into
that. But the first 2 stories, it doesn't seem like the central character has done anything really wrong.
Yeah.
But in this case, like you said, he does sort of deserve what happens to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is kind of funny as well when they're performing this new arrangement of the voodoo music, which is actually pretty good. I felt I was like, oh, this sounds pretty cool. But
yeah,
like when the wind starts happening, they just still carry on. It feels like a good few minutes. Like, yes, everything's fine. The voodoo is not affecting these people at all. Let's keep going. Even though
it's just like somebody opened up a window. Yeah. And I did love the manager. He's like, my restaurant. He's like, well, it's insured, isn't it? Yes, you're right. Well, maybe I'll redo it in a Moroccan theme. This one was so cheeky.
Yeah.
But I said to Mom while I was watching this that I thought Roy Castle kind of reminded me of Bruce Campbell in this. I feel like they look kind of similar in some angles. And he's a silly man.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Should we go on to the 4th one?
Sure.
which I think is a highlight.
I think this one's my
Oh, yeah.
favorite.
Disembodied hand.
Yeah, this one's definitely the best story, I would say.
I mean, I guess they got to give the best one to Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can't not really. You carry on, Christina.
I was just going to say, Christopher Lee's character has been scoffing at, all of this up to this point in the movie, and then he gets his own story, and he is such an ass to this guy, Eric Landor, the artist.
Okay, but I feel like both of them are assholes.
Do you?
I mean, like, Eric Landor is kind of a stalker also.
Oh,
Like,
I mean,
I think this whole story is a little bit buck wild, but I say that affectionately because, again, I think it was my favorite. But, like, we got Christopher Lee, who's the art critic, who's he is an asshole. But then they show him like another painting and they're like, well, can we get your opinion? We're thinking of showing this next new artist. And he's like, oh, well, this one's great. And it does just look kind of like the other one. It's just abstract. And then it's revealed, oh, a chimp did this. And then everyone points and laughs at him. But I'm like, he should have turned it around. He could have turned that into a quip of like, see, even a monkey can do better than you.
Yeah, that was an easy get around that,
Right? But he's so embarrassed that he like shuts down. And then later, Eric Landor follows him to different events. He's got like a cutout of the monkeys while he's speaking.
Yeah,
I love it. I liked that part.
Well, I liked it too, but I couldn't believe that Christopher Lee was like, his
so
character is like,
he couldn't
he can't
carry
even
on with his
speak.
speech. Yeah.
Why wouldn't he be like, get that man out of here?
Yeah, I'm Christopher Lee. Get him out.
Yeah. And then the nuclear option.
He did seem to have like quite a following, like wherever he went. There were always lots of people wanting to hear what he had to say.
Yeah, I did really like this one because I think it just kind of showed Christopher Lee scared and terrified, and you don't often see that because Christopher Lee is usually the one doing the terrifying,
Yeah.
So that was actually quite nice to see, and I just really like the concept of how they play with the severed hands, like where it keeps coming back. And there's a great genuine inner terror moment where I think when he thinks he's boxed it all up and puts it in the river, or it might be after he burnt it, I can't remember, but like he's in a pub having a drink with some friends and then like someone puts his hand on his shoulder and he looks really scared in that moment. So I quite like the fact that there is a little bit of nuance in this story, whereas all the other ones are very matter of fact, whereas there's some inner terror as well here, which is quite cool to see. But yeah, I just love the fact that the hand just keeps coming back, even though he tries to stab it, he tries to burn it, box it up, and put it in the river, and still jumps out and kills him in the car. So that was fun. Really fun.
Well, because he does something buck wild. I almost thought like the hand is a great part and is very scary, but like him as a character is terrifying. That he's like, this guy humiliated me twice. After I guess he routinely goes to Eric Landor's like gallery showings and just shits on him. But Eric Landor gets him twice and he sees him in the road. He's like, I'm going to run that guy over.
Yeah.
He runs him over. Like, that's wild.
Somehow severs his hand with a tire.
Yeah, he could aim the car to get his hand. And then it's not even like a telltale heart. Like he doesn't really seem to feel guilty that he's pushed this man to suicide. He's more just like scared that the hand's coming out. Like he's almost the scariest part because he's such a psycho.
Yeah.
And then in the end, he's blinded.
Yeah, and he said, all throughout the whole thing that basically his superpower is his vision. So he gets what he deserves at the very end. So don't be mean to people, I guess, and don't kill them. Even if they
don't hit and run people. It's just, he totally could have turned it around. Like because even there's a moment where it's like, he's even just at a gallery, and then just Eric Landor's in the background looking sinister, and he has to leave just at the presence of him. But a woman then says to Eric Landor, like, oh, I wish he would keep talking. Like, I love hearing what he has to say. So his reputation's fine. It's just that he hates this guy.
Yeah. But he must be blinded at the end. That's the moral of this story. Not the fact that he's a hit and run driver, but he's a bad art critic.
The worst.
All the hand effects, though, were pretty good. Well,
I thought so too.
Yeah, me too.
Right, you know,
they like crawl.
I feel like you can feel the craftsmanship that's gone into this film with that severed hand. And it looked really great when it was burnt as well. Yeah. Even though it's just like not really using its fingers, it's just going up and down with the movement. But yeah, I liked it. It was like really charming.
Yeah. Like I feel like, I mean, obviously it would be really complicated to, you know, make it dance on its fingers, but almost the like slow drag of it reminds me of like just a zombie.
Yeah.
And that it's just this dead, hateful thing coming after him. And yeah, I loved that when he burned it, that it came back all charred and whatnot. Like he is like, there's proof that he did stuff to it, but he can't kill it. That was great.
And it looked all, you know, I like that description, that it looked like a zombie hand. It's all dirty and, you know, disgusting. Whereas in like a lot of like severed hand stuff now, like the first thing you notice is that, oh, that's just a guy in a green screen, a green suit, you know, without his hand. That's the first thing you notice. But yeah, with this, you don't have that. They're really trying to like make it work with a prop.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of the steak in Poltergeist, Mac. Remember when the steak is just kind of like moving across the counter?
Yes. Yeah.
Should we move on to the fifth story, Vampire?
Sure. I was surprised that like Christopher Lee's wasn't the final one.
Yeah.
Like it kind of reminds me of like in Chicago when they do Cell Block Tango. You'd think Catherine Zeta-Jones would be the last one, but she goes and it's very epic. And then there's one more person after her. But it just feels like she should be the one to cap it off. Which, I mean, I was looking forward to Donald Sutherland's, obviously, because I love him. But I was like, oh, yeah, and this guy.
I think they should have switched 4 and 5 because this one ends with a joke, you know. So I think
this one was so silly at the end.
I really like the last one as well, though.
I mean, I like
it too. I just feel like, you know, it might have been stronger if they would have switched to these other two. But you know,
I guess it feels a bit more epilogue-y having this one at the end and having the main event, the one, you know, second from last, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this vampire, I feel like there's a vampire one in all of the portmanteau Amicus ones. I think in Vault of Horror, there's a great one where a guy goes into a restaurant and there's all these curtains on the wall and all they serve is, you know, red soup, red meat and stuff. And when, you know, the restaurant is like filled with people, but when they find out he's a human, like they pull the curtains and it's all mirrors and he's the only one that he can see.
Oh, I like it.
In the restaurant.
That's cool.
And there's another one, I think, in The House That Drips Blood, the second one, where I think that's with John Pertwee, because they all go to the same house. All the stories are in the same house in that one, not a drain. And he finds this cape, and like he keeps being allured to this cape. He wants to wear it like all the time, and he slowly becomes a vampire. And then it's like a really goofy shot where he's levitating with really badly fake teeth with fangs. But this one is really great because yes, it has that kind of revealing scene right from the start where Donald Sutherland like cuts his finger or something, and the actress is like, "Ooh, that looks nice."
Yeah, like let me take care of that for you. And I do love that Donald Sutherland's character has no reaction to this. Like, he's just kind of like, my beautiful wife. Like that's a pretty weird thing to do.
Stake you in the heart while you're sleeping.
Also, I did like the vampire lore in this of like, it's totally fine to be in sunlight, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Or it's rather, they could only afford to just shoot it during the day.
Just hope nobody notices.
Yeah. I felt bad for
I thought it was quite... Carry on, Christy.
I was just going to say, I just felt bad for the little boy with his like 2 little vampire pricks on his neck, and I'm not sure what the actual diagnosis was for him. I know he felt weak, and but I don't know. And then the one doctor makes a joke, if this were the Middle Ages, we would have suspected that there was a vampire on the loose. And then he and Donald Sutherland laugh.
Well, okay, at first when I watched this, I'm just thinking now about the twist revealing at the ending of this one. It's like, when I first watched this, I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of weird that doctor brings it up. But now I'm thinking, like, he probably is trying to figure out, who's this vampire? Like,
yeah.
And that's why he's so forth. Maybe he thinks Donald Sutherland is, or something like that. Like, that he immediate, or like, I feel like he's trying to see what Donald Sutherland's like reaction is by being like, hey, could be a vampire. What do you think about that?
That's a good point.
Suss something out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I was the only vampire in this city.
Yeah, right? Like, that's not mine.
Because when he meets the wife, he doesn't there isn't any like, ha, I see you. There's no recognition at all. But I had a question about making the cross. Because
would that hurt him if he's but maybe it's just the display of the shadow was too much.
Yeah, you get that a lot in Hammer and Amicus. You just got to get any old object, your arms, your fingers, make a cross, and you'll be absolutely fine.
But it doesn't hurt him to do it.
Yeah, that would have been a nice little wrinkle if it had. Like, he had to call.
Like, maybe he gets a burn.
Yeah,
on his arm,
that would have been good.
But yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool sequence, though. Nicely drawn out, where you have this cat and mouse moment where the lady is trying to get out of the building, and the guy, accidentally puts his hands in a cross. That was pretty good. And it's really well done, I think, because all your attention is just on the female actress knowing that she's a vampire. Like, is she going to die at the end or not? There's no focus really on the doctor at all until right at the end. So I didn't really see it coming at all.
Oh, same.
Yeah, that was really clever. Not sure about the final pose, though, to transform into the bat, but there we go.
I do love, this is another guy who is like, I gotta live with you also while I observe this kid. Like, I'm gonna be staying at your house now.
Lots of
but yeah, I did
lots of sleepovers in England in the 60s, I guess.
Yeah.
I do love how he was just like tee like at the end.
Yeah.
like can't have two doctors or two vampires.
Wink.
That was brilliant. Great grin at the end.
But yeah, I felt so bad because Donald Sutherland, stabs because he's like, well, she's a vampire, you got to get her, and he gets her, and then just is like, I never told this guy to stab her. Like, that's so horrifying for Donald Sutherland's character. Of like, he doesn't know if any of it's real, and if he just killed a human woman, did he just kill his beloved wife, and he'll never know. That's so fucked up.
He's just sat there in prison, like, thinking he's just murdered his wife. She's a vampire, even though she is.
Yeah.
Such a good story, that last one. I feel like Donald Sutherland is a little too good for this story. Like, everyone else is like really hamming it up, whereas Donald Sutherland is really serious, trying to be a serious actor in a British horror film. So he does stick out a little bit. I'm like, you're acting amazing. What's going on? You're this good.
And then back in the train car, we get the whammy at the end, which is a little confusing to me, but
Yeah.
Because all of them get the death card for their 5th card, so they're all like, well, wait a second. All of our fates are in death. Well, we got to make sure the train doesn't crash. I was like, wait, but what about your stories?
I mean, they were fun stories, but...
Yeah. So they all think they're going to, die in a train crash, but then they get to their destination and then they see the newspaper and it reads like 5 people die in a train crash. So they've already been dead this whole time.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, okay, did all these stories never happen? Or is it kind of this purgatory thing where, are these purgatory stories to see whether they go to hell or not? I don't know. It was a bit confusing.
Yeah.
So do you think this actually happened or not?
I don't know. Like, I just feel like it kind of muddies the waters a little bit by the end if they die. Also, it's very specific. I guess only their cart crashed, because if only 5 people died in that train crash, then everyone else is fine. But it was just them. And then when they see Peter Cushing, it's like, wait a second, and then they cut back, and now he's a skeleton. So I guess he's the god of death. So maybe he's just fucking with them.
He's having a good time.
Maybe before you get to this place, you have they were due at a certain time, and he had to stall. I don't know. Or maybe
long train ride to hell.
Maybe they just needed an ending for the movie, and they just whipped one together suddenly. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's not to think too hard about it, I guess.
No.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it until we started talking about it, but when I first watched it, you're just like, whoa, they're dead now. All right, movie's over. But I still enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah,
I thought it was very fun.
I mean, at the time, there's definitely some, when I watched it for the first time, there's definitely some scary moments in there, but I think now, that it's more funny than scary, but I definitely appreciate the charm and the craftsmanship gone into this. Even though some of the acting is pretty ropey and, the scenes do come off a bit silly now, but it's still a lot of fun. Yeah,
I feel like charming is a good word. I would rather have something be silly and charming than just feel soulless, but I feel like there's certainly a lot of horror movies that just feel like I could have gone my whole life without seeing this and nothing of value would have been lost. But I got something out of watching this. It did make me laugh out loud at some points, but not just that. I did genuinely enjoy it and thought it was really fun.
It's not like it's not scary as well now. I mean, definitely that first story where the woman changes into a, I'm struggling to say werewolf because it doesn't really look like one, but it did send some chills down my spine when you first see that. I was like, oh, crap, I did not see that. So a lot of the writing in here is really kind of clever. And also, it doesn't outstay its welcome in all the stories. There's no draggy bits. I wouldn't cut out anything really in terms of areas where it drags or so I wouldn't add anything either, to be honest. So it's really tight.
Yeah
I think one more story would have been too long, so it's just just the right amount. And I think
that many people wouldn't fit in that car.
That's true.
I think some of them vary. There's some with 4 stories. I think there's one with 6 actually. So they kind of vary in how many different stories there are in the movies.
But five is good.
Definitely. But I mean, this cast is pretty incredible, really. You got Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Donald Sutherland. Certainly looking back now, that's 3 big hitters.
And they all do a great job. Peter Cushing, we didn't really talk about him, but I think he does, despite his strange accent, I feel like he just plays the role of creepy, I don't know, creepy fortune teller very well.
Absolutely.
He's trying to play it off by falling asleep, so at first they don't really think anything of him, but then he's this, terrifying being at the end.
Yeah, it's a great change up for these two actors as well, because they've played Dracula and Van Helsing countless times in Hammer movies, so these films are just great for them to just explore different characters in this time period in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah,
they had such a cool friendship, and we talked a little bit about it when we did the Creeping Flesh. Christopher Lee said some really touching things at Peter Cushing's funeral, and they had really a wonderful, friendship. And I think it's fun to go back, to Wicker Man, or I don't know, some of his earlier things, and he's just really fun to watch.
I love him.
Me too.
Like I feel like every time I've watched a movie with him in it, I've been like, that was a great experience.
Definitely.
Well, any final thoughts on Dr. Terror's House of Horror?
Yeah, I think the word we're all coming to is like it's really charming, and I think some horror films don't have to be like super scary to be enjoyable. Like there's some really great creativity in the horror stories here. That's what's really appealing about these films from Amicus, is just the creative horror. Whereas with Hammer, it's more the traditional one. There's even a film, The Beast Must Die, with Peter Cushing as well, where it's like an Agatha Christie story, where they try and figure out who is the werewolf in this big mansion. And there's even a moment where a title card comes up and it says, where the film basically stops. It goes to black with a title card saying something like, "Who do you think the werewolf is?" And the next scene is literally you find out who the werewolf is, which is kind of funny. Just brilliantly charming for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Hammer was a little more straight ahead, just like straight up horror, and Amicus had maybe kind of sense of humor about themselves.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's great. I definitely want to check out more Amicus films. This one was really fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, Martin, at the top, I didn't give you a chance to talk about who you are and what your podcast is all about. So why don't we do that now?
Sure. Yeah, so I am Martin Harries. I am the host of the Film vs. Film podcast, the UK one. We have a look at cinema releases or streaming, and we figure out a subject from that release, and I invite a guest on, and we pick 2 films relating to that subject, and we talk about it in terms of directing, screenplay, and acting, give it a score out of 10, and see who wins. It's a lot of fun. You guys, obviously being record breakers, been on the podcast 3 times. Great followers of the podcast. Thank you very much. You can find us where you found this podcast, in all podcast catching devices, Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. I'm not calling it X. At film FVF_podcast.
Great. Well, thanks so much for bringing this film to us and sharing your love of it with us too. And I'm sure we'll talk to you real soon, Martin.
Yeah.
A million thanks again to our guest, Martin Harries of the Film vs. Film podcast, for coming on to talk about a film that means the world of horror to him. If you'd like to follow his lead, please get in touch. Next up on the main show, Mac and I discuss Starship Troopers and Slashback, 2 films about aliens. I think you're really going to enjoy that one. Thanks so much for all your support. It means the world of horror to us truly. We love you, WoHos, and don't go into the basement. If you listen this far, your international horror film fact of the day is that Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing had 22 collaborations.